if I may say, cheating at the registration. Because of cheating at the registration, we had evidence of people being registered before the opening of the registration centers. Registration centers are supposed to open at 8 o'clock and close at 5 o'clock in the evening. But people have been registered as early as 7 o'clock in the morning. And people got registered even after 5 o'clock, some up to 8 o'clock in the evening. This must have been into thousands. And of course, that apart, we have evidence of people being registered after the close of registration throughout the country. So it was cheating. Those Gambians, those real Gambians, who really wanted to elect a government of their own, all voted for UDP.
But some will say there was a time after the registration, there was time to go to the, how do you call it? The revising court. Yeah. When did you get this evidence? Was it after the elections or before?
It was after the election. You cannot, through in fact, the revising court, you go to a revising court to say that the person is not qualified to be registered as a voter. One is that he has not attained the age, or two, he is not a citizen of the Gambia, or he's otherwise unqualified to be registered as a voter. But registering anybody at 10 o'clock, at 7:30, you cannot detect that. And you cannot use that as a ground for really getting the person of the register of voters. Because it's not one of the qualifications. It is assumed that the person registered within the prescribed time and within the prescribed period, not outside the prescribed time or outside the prescribed period. So when they do this cheating outside of the registration hours, outside of the registration period, you cannot detect them. Because when you expose, when you publicize or put in them in the bantabas, the list of voters, the time is not indicated there. The days are not indicated. The days are not indicated. I just have Fature, Lamen, voter registration number so and so. So it was not possible to really detect that, and you cannot go to the revising court with that and say Fature is not entitled to be registered as a voter, because even then, you wouldn't even have known that Fature registered after the 11th of July. You didn't have known.
So you went to the court. You have always trusted our court system. You know, even when people say, let's go to the streets, let's do this, you say, I believe in the courts. Let's go to the courts. Let's test our courts. And that has been evident, the way UDP has always tested the courts. But this time, after the ruling, when the court rejected your lawyers, you made a statement. It seems like at this point you were frustrated with what came out of the courts.
My statement was not an indication of lack of confidence in the judiciary. I have always held our Gambian judiciary in very high esteem. I have always believed that our judges are men of high integrity, very erudite persons, and I have never doubted their integrity. But then there's always problems of approaches. When our action was struck out in the first instance, we thought that the judges were being very technical. They were not really looking at the substance of the claim. They were not minded to do substantial justice. It was a slavish adherence to procedural rules. And we, of course, also exploited the procedural rules that allows us to ask for a review. And we pointed out the mistakes by their lordships
But Mr. Darboe, people say, I've seen a lot of your critics say, UDP yourself, one of the best constitutional lawyers in this country, ever in this country. You have the lawyers like Bori Toure, Almame, Lamin, Darboe. All the lawyers you think of are from UDP. But how many times we have seen cases where people say UDP always get it wrong? The case of Sirifo versus UDP, the judge, you lost that case. This case also with all the lawyers, something as serious as this election petition, that you have evidence. Why did your team got that technicality wrong?
Yes, I agree that this is some of the arguments that the people make. With the Sirifo Sonko case, I don't want to talk much about it.
Yeah.
Because in the first go, I know that it was procedurally wrong for the judge on her own initiative to refer the matter to the Supreme Court. It is a party, a litigant, that has the right to ask for a matter to be referred to the Supreme Court for either interpretation of the Constitution or an enforcement of the Constitution. The court, suo motu, does not have that right because you are descending into the arena of conflict. In fact, even the lawyer, Sirifo Sonko, was opposed to the matter being referred to the Supreme Court by the judge. And of course, when it went to the Supreme Court, really, the court ought to have asked themselves, has this come to us in a proper way? Because if it didn't reach them through the right procedures, they have no jurisdiction over the matter. But you see, I don't want to be seen to be litigious. Or our party, we don't want to be seen to be litigious. We know that it was wrong for the matter to be referred to the Supreme Court in that way. And really, the argument that the law does not allow for the Constitution does not allow the National Assembly to make such a provision, such a rule, it is patently wrong. After all, the Constitution says that the local government, you have local government dealing with the tenure. And when you cease to be a member of the party on whose ticket you were really elected, that would affect your tenure. So how can resignation, which affects tenure, how can that be validly be made by the National Assembly? But then the issue of really rejecting the party on whose ticket you contested cannot now be validly legislated upon. For me, it was a muddled and convoluted reasoning. You see, if we had, journals of law, legal journals here, the academicians will comment on these things to show the flaws. After all, they are just the lords of the Supreme Court. They are very educated person, but that does not mean that they cannot be wrong in their reasoning. It does not mean that they cannot be wrong in their conclusions. And that is why the academics always pick up these type of issues and deal with them. We're looking forward to the day, maybe, when a matter like this will come up again to the Supreme Court, in which maybe I could appear as an amicus, not defending UDP, but some other interested person, a point of no similar. Now, with respect to the petition, when we filed the petition, I think we took all the precautionary steps. When we applied for the court to determine security. And that was done. And nobody would tell me that the Honorable Chief Justice did not know what he was doing. The Honorable Chief Justice certainly knew what he was doing when he ordered cost to be in the sum of $300,000 and further ordered that is by way of deposit. And obviously, he did that because he must have read the rules before he made such an order. But now, to say that, you should have served. You should have served the other person. I think the whole purpose of service is to ensure whether the security to be provided is sufficient or insufficient. If the respondent thought that security was insufficient, I think the right thing would have been for them to apply for it to be reviewed and for them to ask for a higher amount of money, a higher sum of money. because it's at least, is to make sure that they are not left high and dry when it comes to recovering their expenses in the litigation. That's the whole purpose and intention. So really, if you are minded to do substantial justice, the purpose of all this, that's what you look at. And we knew that. I mean, and we strongly believe, and I strongly believe that the court was wrong. And we had applied for review. I said, well, we are not going to change our mind. We will maintain what I've stated. That's okay. But then again, I'm sure when we held our press conference and pointed out what the present evidence that would have been placed before the court, I'm sure a lot of them must have felt very bad, that really we should have allowed this petition to go on so that we hear the substance in this matter.
Why did you, it was more like trial by the media. You wanted the Gambian people to know what happened, and you took it to the media, you gave it to them to consume it, and you spent so much time on that. A lot of observers say UDP is spending so much time on this to the point that they have even forgotten the National Assembly election. Why was that important?
Well, we didn't forget the National Assembly election. Contrary, that's what people tell. Why didn't we forget the National Assembly election? I mean,
was that a strategy?
Since the results were declared, we knew that there was a National Assembly elections coming on, and our concentration was on that. I mean, UDP is such a big party, some individuals will deal with certain issues, other individuals will deal with certain issues, and this was a very important matter to us, because I'm sure most of part people, so we have to come out and say, look, it is not Nancy killing. If it's not Nancy Fuller, if it's not that's Woolly killing, it is Woolly Tanglu. Huge amount of money. It's not only that, but even the registers, we are cheating. And we have to show the Gambian people so that they know that, we didn't go to court because we are just being litigious. We went to court because we believed that the elections was not won according to the law. We went to court because that there was bad register, a rogue register that was used. And of course, we also believe that on precedent, what the law is called on precedent, that in the 1960s, when Muhammad Sabali took Ian Kokil, the administrator of the North Bank, who was then resident in Mansakonko, to court and challenged the register of the register of voters, that it was not properly compiled, that it was an illegal register. When the West African Court of Appeal agreed with the petitioners and declared the register of voters throughout the protectorate then invalid. And certainly, if we had gone to trial with all this registration after the period, with all the registration after the time, and then in fact we had even served, was filed, that the IEC should produce, the data, which would show all these things. Yeah? Then the court would have declared that certainly it would have no choice but to say that the register of voters was really bad. It was not done according to law.
And during the different press statements that was made, at some point the party also accused the IEC of conniving with the NPP at some point. I have not seen any press statement from the IEC to deny those allegations, even though they had an interview with the Standard newspaper. But do you still stand by that?
Well, yes, I do. I remember that the IEC, I think their communication officer, he said this is just a distraction. They just dismissed it and said it's a distraction. But, we had the documents to show them. And nobody said that those are false. Nobody said that we made them up. And I'm sure, you go to their database, you find tons of that in it.
So the accusation here was really serious, registering non-Gambians. I think every single Gambian should be worried about that. Because
well, I'm not saying registering non-Gambians.
Yeah.
I'm saying that, in fact, registering people, there could be Gambians.
Some people
say,
okay, no, okay.
Outside
the registration period.
Outside of the registration period, outside of registration hours, there could be Gambians. And it doesn't matter if you are a Gambian, you should not be registered after the 11th of July. It does not matter, even if you are a Gambian, you should not be registered after 5 p.m. Nor should you be registered before 8 a.m. So it doesn't matter whether you're a Gambian or a non-Gambian.
And one thing I want to also bring on was just right after the election, there was little political tension that happened. Do you think if you have handled it differently, what would have been the outcome? A lot of your supporters, usually what they do is come to your home, whether good or bad. And they were there right after the election, when the election was declared and you lost. They came to show solidarity. The aftermath was really ugly. Do you think if you had handled it differently, it would have been bad for Gambia?